The river was no longer a river. It lay stretched across the land as a shallow scar, a wide channel of pale sand, cracked mud, and scattered stones that remembered flow but no longer carried it. Where water had once moved, heat now settled instead, pressing downward and flattening the air. The hyena walked along its centre, not at the edges, where brush and shade offered cover, but where the channel ran cleanest, uninterrupted by vegetation. Dry rivers gathered movement. Animals followed them out of habit, memory, or lack of better options. Where bodies moved, food sometimes followed. The hyena's head stayed low. Her ears rotated slowly, catching sounds that meant little on their own: wind dragging sand, insects lifting and falling, distant birds calling without urgency. The dry river amplified everything, then explained nothing. Smell should have arrived first. It usually did. Carrion announced itself from kilometers away in this heat, carried on thermals that rose and collapsed unpredictably. A hyena relied on that early warning, scent that pulled direction into clarity long before sight or sound confirmed anything. Today, there was nothing. The air lay heavy and still, pressed flat by heat that erased layers. Scent did not travel cleanly here. It pooled, thinned, broke apart. The hyena continued anyway. Her gait was steady, economical, jaws slightly open to allow airflow, tongue visible between teeth. Heat demanded constant regulation. Moving too fast burned water the body could not easily replace. The riverbed sloped gently downward. This mattered. Where water had once slowed, debris gathered. Bones accumulated. Sometimes bodies fell here. Animals weakened by thirst, injured upstream, pushed into the channel by chance rather than pursuit. The hyena paused at a bend. Dry reeds rattled faintly along the bank. The channel widened slightly, opening into a shallow basin where mud had once held moisture longest. Cracks here were deeper, wider, telling a longer story of absence. She lifted her head and tested the air again. Still nothing. No rot, no blood, no signal, only dust and sun and the faint mineral smell of baked earth. The hyena's stomach tightened. Not hunger, calculation. Following the dry river cost time and energy. Without scent, it became a gamble rather than a strategy, but leaving it too early meant abandoning the only structured path through an otherwise featureless landscape. She moved on. Tracks crossed the riverbed ahead. Antelope. Old. Edges softened by wind, direction barely readable. They had passed hours ago, maybe longer. Whatever had followed them, if anything had, was already gone. The hyena lowered her head and sniffed the ground directly. Sometimes scent clung where air failed. Sand held traces longer in shade beneath stones, near cracks that trapped cooler air. Nothing useful emerged. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmered above the riverbed now, distorting distance and flattening depth. The far bank looked closer than it was. Sound thinned further, losing definition. The hyena angled slightly toward the shaded side of the channel, but did not leave it. Dry rivers punished indecision. The animals that survived them committed or turned away completely. Ahead, vultures lifted suddenly from the bank. Not many, just two. They rose without calling, circling once before drifting off downwind. Their behavior was ambiguous, not the frenzy that signaled fresh death, not the indifference of empty ground. The hyena stopped. Her body stiffened slightly, attention sharpening. Vultures did not waste energy without reason. Even a hint of interest mattered. She tested the air again, and this time something arrived. Faint. Late. Rot, stretched thin by distance and heat, arriving in fragments rather than a clear line. It did not pull direction immediately. It hovered, uncertain, as if deciding whether to exist at all. The hyena turned her head slowly, narrowing the angle until the smell grew just perceptibly stronger. There, downstream. The river was dry, but it still carried information, delayed, distorted, incomplete. The hyena resumed walking, posture unchanged, but purpose restored. She did not accelerate. Rushing ahead of scent meant overshooting what little advantage remained. The smell had arrived late. That made everything downstream uncertain. And the hyena followed the river anyway, knowing that in landscapes like this, food did not announce itself clearly. It revealed itself only to those willing to move long enough through absence to recognize when something finally appeared. The smell did not strengthen the way it should have. As the hyena moved downstream, it came and went in uneven pulses, carried by weak eddies of air that formed and collapsed without pattern. One moment it was there, unmistakable, sour and dense, and the next it vanished completely, replaced by dust and the flat mineral scent of dry stone. The delay changed everything. Normally, scent led. It pulled the body forward, narrowing options, reducing search into approach. Now it lagged behind movement, arriving late and leaving early, forcing the hyena to slow and reassess constantly. She followed the riverbed's curve into a narrower section where banks rose higher and shade clung longer. Here, the ground dipped slightly, trapping cooler air for brief periods. Smell gathered here more reliably, though still fractured. The hyena stopped and lifted her head. This time, the scent held. Carrion. Close, but not fresh. She did not rush. Old carcasses invited competition. They drew others who waited for signals stronger than patience. The absence of noise ahead suggested that whatever lay downstream was either already claimed or not worth fighting over yet. She moved forward carefully now, stepping along the edge of the channel where sand was firmer and less disturbed. Her head angled slightly to one side, testing direction without committing fully. Bones appeared first. A rib. Bleached, half buried where sand had shifted around it. It told little on its own, but it confirmed that this stretch of river had collected bodies before. Another step. Then another. The carcass came into view gradually, revealed not all at once but in pieces. Hide stretched tight over exposed flank, legs twisted unnaturally, head missing. A wildebeest, fallen into the channel and broken during collapse rather than killed cleanly. The smell explained itself now. Old, but usable. The hyena stopped several body lengths away. She scanned. No movement, no immediate threat. But that meant nothing. She circled wide, stepping out of the channel briefly to approach from downwind. Heat warped distance. Air that looked still moved in thin layers close to the ground. Reading it required patience. On the far side of the carcass, tracks cut through the sand. Hyena, another, larger, earlier. Edges softened but clear enough to tell direction. The prints led away upstream, not downstream. Whoever had fed here had already moved on. The hyena lowered her head slightly. This was opportunity, but not ownership. She moved in quickly now, not frantically, efficiently. Her jaws closed around the thick hide near the shoulder and pulled hard, tearing through tissue that had dried and stiffened. The resistance was greater than with fresh meat, but fat still clung beneath, preserved by dryness rather than rot. She ate standing, not because she feared attack, but because sitting wasted time. Every second spent here invited arrival, vultures first, then others drawn by them. Her teeth cracked through bone. Marrow released slowly, thick and rich. She consumed it immediately, swallowing without pause, heat and energy returning together. Above her, wings beat once. Then again. Vultures circled now, lower than before, their interest sharpened by visible feeding. They did not descend yet. They waited. The hyena lifted her head and scanned again. Still no immediate competition. But the smell had changed. Not stronger, broader. It spread now, no longer trapped by the river's curve. Heat carried it upward, outward, announcing what silence had hidden earlier. She tore free another section and backed away suddenly, dragging it several steps downstream before dropping it and eating quickly. Moving carcass fragments disrupted expectation. It bought time. The sun pressed harder now. Heat shimmered across the channel, distorting outlines and flattening movement. The smell intensified, then dulled again as air shifted. She finished feeding and stepped back. Not because she was full, because the balance had tipped. The vultures descended at once, landing heavily and awkwardly, tearing at what remained. Their noise filled the channel, loud enough to travel far. Others would hear it. The hyena moved on without looking back. She followed the dry river further downstream, body heavier now, pace unchanged. The smell of carrion clung faintly to her muzzle, but she did not linger in it. The dry river had delivered something, late, incomplete, and temporary. That was often how it worked. Food here did not wait to be claimed. It appeared briefly, then became a signal for conflict rather than nourishment. The hyena left before that stage arrived, continuing along the channel that offered nothing consistently, except the chance that absence might eventually turn into something worth stopping for again. By midday, the riverbed no longer offered even the illusion of movement. The air pressed downward, thick and unmoving, trapping heat between the banks like a lid. Sand reflected light upward, forcing the hyena to narrow her eyes as she walked. Every breath tasted dry, stripped of scent except what clung stubbornly to her muzzle. The carrion smell faded completely, not gradually, abruptly. One moment it lingered faintly in the back of her throat, and the next it was gone, replaced by nothing at all. Heat had lifted it away, scattered it into layers of air too thin to read. This was dangerous. A landscape without smell was a landscape without warning. The hyena slowed and angled toward the shaded side of the channel, hugging the bank where collapsed earth formed low overhangs. Here, the ground was cooler by degrees, enough to matter. She stopped briefly beneath one and panted, jaws open, saliva stringing between teeth before evaporating. Sound arrived instead, not animal, mechanical. A distant engine, irregular and low, carried across the plain and filtered into the riverbed. The sound bounced off dry banks, losing direction, arriving as vibration more than noise. Humans. The hyena lifted her head and listened. The engine stopped. Voices followed, faint, broken by distance and heat, but unmistakable. Human sound carried differently than animal sound. It cut through heat instead of dissolving into it. The hyena did not panic. She adjusted. Dry rivers were used by people too. Roads followed them. Paths cut along them. What served animals as corridors served humans the same way, for different reasons. She moved again, this time leaving the center of the channel and climbing partway up the bank where scattered brush offered broken cover. Her body stayed low, movement steady, avoiding sudden acceleration that would draw attention. The smell returned. Not carrion, fuel, oil, dust. Human scent arrived late too, lagging behind sound the way rot had lagged earlier. It spread unevenly, pooling in depressions and vanishing in open stretches. The hyena crossed a shallow side channel and paused. Tracks lay there, fresh boot prints, tire marks pressed into softer sand where a seasonal stream had once fed the river. The edges were sharp, recent. This was no longer neutral ground. She angled away from the main channel now, using a narrow spur where erosion had cut into the bank, forming a shallow trench that ran parallel for several dozen meters. It offered concealment without committing her to full retreat. Behind her, the riverbed remained exposed. The engine noise started again, closer now, then faded. Dust rose briefly above the bank and drifted away. Whatever humans were doing, they were not following the channel directly. Still, the hyena did not return. Heat punished mistakes more slowly than predators, but more reliably. Being seen here would not mean immediate danger, but it could mean dogs later, or traps, or a closing of space that had once been open. She moved away from the river. Not far. Just enough. Beyond the bank, the land flattened into scrub and thorn, sparse but alive. Shade existed in fragments. Insects moved. Smell returned faintly, rodents, old dung, dry plants releasing oils under heat. The hyena stopped beneath a stunted acacia and stood still. Her body was hot now, flanks heaving gently. The energy gained from the carcass earlier burned steadily, keeping her moving through conditions that would have forced others to stop. The dry river had given what it would. It had delivered food late, then delivered warning even later. She would not follow it farther today. The channel still lay there, pale and empty, pretending to be a path. But paths that carried nothing early and danger late were not worth committing to. The hyena turned her body away from it fully now and walked into scrubland where information returned in smaller pieces but at least arrived on time. Behind her, the dry river continued to hold heat and erase smell, offering nothing but delayed signals and exposure. And the hyena, having read enough of what arrived too late, chose to leave before absence turned into consequence. The heat broke unevenly. It did not leave all at once, but drained out of the land in layers, sinking first into the dry riverbed and only later into the scrub beyond it. Shadows stretched long across sand and stone, dulling glare and restoring depth where there had been none all day. The hyena felt it through her paws. The ground softened slightly, no longer radiating heat upward. Air moved again, thin currents slipping along the surface instead of hanging motionless above it. With that movement came smell, not strong, not useful, but present. Information returned. She stood at the edge of the scrub and looked back toward the river. From here, the channel appeared harmless, pale, empty, a simple line cut into the land. In cooler light, it gave no sign of how it erased scent, delayed warning, and carried danger without announcing it. The smell of carrion was gone completely now, not masked, gone. What remained of the carcass would be reduced to bone and noise by morning, stripped clean by birds and smaller scavengers that worked faster than heat. There would be nothing left worth following. The hyena did not regret leaving. She had taken what the river offered and avoided what it would have added later. Hunger was quieter now, pushed back far enough to allow choice rather than compulsion. She moved farther into the scrub as light faded, choosing a route that followed broken ground rather than any obvious path. Here, movement scattered, tracks overlapped. Scent lingered just long enough to be read, then thinned. Night insects began to sound. Their calls stitched the air together, replacing the emptiness of heat with a layered background that made other noises easier to place. Somewhere in the distance, another hyena called once. Not close, not a challenge, just a marker of shared space. The answering call did not come. She was alone here. That was acceptable. The hyena lowered herself beneath a cluster of thorn and lay down, body angled to catch the faint breeze that slid across the ground. Her breathing slowed. Muscles loosened gradually, releasing the tension held since morning. The day's lessons settled. Food that arrived late demanded restraint. Paths that promised efficiency hid exposure. Smell that failed early could not be trusted later. The dry river had revealed all of this by refusing to behave the way it should have. By morning, it would look unchanged, cooler, quieter, almost inviting. Others would follow it again, drawn by memory and convenience, hoping for earlier signs than the ones she had received. Some would find them, some would not. The hyena closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, never fully surrendering awareness. Night brought its own risks, but it also brought clarity that heat had stripped away. Behind her, the dry river lay still, holding nothing and remembering nothing. The smell had arrived late. That had been enough. She had listened, not when it first appeared, but when it disappeared, and in landscapes like this, knowing when information ended mattered as much as knowing when it began.